Hi, and welcome back to Lisa's Stamp Studio. Christmas is never short on glitter and sparkle, and today's card is going to showcase just that, but it also has a fun twist to it. I've got a hidden pocket on the inside of this card that's going to hold a gift card. I've got lots of tips for you about putting this card together, and it's super easy. It's one of those cards you can make bunches of for the holidays, and it's certainly a fun way to package a gift card. If this is your first time visiting my YouTube channel, I would love to have you subscribe. Make sure you click the subscribe button down below and click the small bell icon that's next to it. That will send you notifications when I'm live here on YouTube, as well as when I upload a new video. Here's the card we're going to be creating together today, and I'm excited to show you the inside when we head over the stamp table. So let's get started. Here's a good close-up of that card I was showing you in the introduction. Isn't this pretty? We're going to be doing some embossing, both heat embossing and regular embossing with the die cutting and embossing machine, as well as create this fun internal hidden pocket to hold a gift card. The very first thing I did was I used the tufted 3D embossing folder. I'm really loving this because I thought it mimicked the designer series paper that I'm going to use really well. The 3D pattern gives you a lot of texture to the outside of your card. The designer series paper that I'm using comes from a package called Brightly Gleaming, and it's going to be found in the Stampin' Up! Holiday catalog here on page 32. Now, if you think this paper is beautiful, wait till you see the rest. They all have copper impressions in them, and the other side, of course, double-sided paper, is going to give you a more traditional kind of look without the foil embellishment. Just gorgeous for the holidays. I'm going to be doing a little bit of scoring on this designer series paper so that I can create the wrap on this card that's going to go from the front to the inside to hold the gift card. I'm going to work upside down, not only because I think it's going to be easier for you to see, but it's eventually the way it's going to be folded. Now the score lines are very simple. The first one is going to be at 5.5 inches. My paper trimmer actually has a scoring blade, but if yours doesn't, a good tip for you is to use your bone folder right down the center of your scoring track. So I'm going to go ahead and score at 5.5, and then I've slid over to 9.5 inches, and I'll make my second score line. The center fold, I'm going to go ahead and fold in half. And since this is going to be holding my gift card, I like to reinforce those score lines with my bone folder to get a nice crisp crease. This bottom score line is going to get folded in as well, and then reinforce it with your bone folder. We're going to want to create a notch here for the gift card, and I'm going to be using the 1-inch circle punch for that. I'm going to be using it upside down about halfway. I'm looking to see that there's about equal space on both sides of the punch, and then once I'm satisfied, I'll go ahead and create that notch. Let's go ahead now and close up this pocket. I'm going to place my silicone craft sheet underneath here just to make sure that I don't get adhesive on my work surface. Liquid glue, hot glue, and adhesive will not stick to it, which makes it a wonderful accompaniment here in the Stamp Studio. I'm going to be using tear and tape, and the reason I want to use a nice strong tape on this is because I know that my card is going to be inserted in and out of that pocket, and I want to make sure it's going to hold up. So I've got a piece right along the outside edge here, and I'm going to place another piece right along the outside edge on this side. Once you have the tape in place, make sure that you press the paper backing inside to the paper, and then I'm going to use my paper piercing tool attachment on my Take Your Pick tool to go ahead and lift off that paper backing, which will reveal the other sticky side. Once that's finished, all we have to do is close this up to create our pocket. Now I want to give you one other tip. Sometimes when you adhere it, the pocket is a little bit tight. So what I like to do is take my bone folder down inside the pocket and very gently come back and forth just to create a little bit of give there so that my gift card will go in and out very easily. Here is the card base that was previously embossed with the tufted embossing folder. Just to give you a visual on how this will go, I've folded it in half. The open end of the designer paper is going to be at the top of my card at the crease. And then the pocket then will get adhered to the inside of the card. I'm going to use my silicone craft sheet once again, and this time I'm going to lay adhesive along the outside perimeter of my designer paper. If you prefer to use tear and tape or liquid glue, you certainly can do so. I'm also going to place it right along here at the crease line as well. To make it easier for my hand, I've opened up the card base, and I'm going to align this so that the designer paper is centered as much as possible. And then I'll go ahead and press that in place. And now I'm coming to the inside of the card. So this is the inside top back, and this is where the pocket is going to get adhered here. So I'll do the exact same thing here by placing adhesive along the outside edges. And then what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and close that up. Make sure you rub well from the back side to make sure that the adhesive is good and stuck. Let's go ahead while we're working on the inside portion and let's stamp the inside greeting to this card. I'm using Night of Navy ink, which is one of the colors that are inside the designer series paper, and I've chosen the greeting "and be jolly this season." You may think that it's incomplete, and it is, because it's part of a stamp set called Christmas is Gleaming. This coordinates with the designer series paper I just shared with you, and you can see the words here, "Merry Christmas" can be on the outside, and "be jolly this season" can be placed on the inside. So that's how I'm using this. The great thing about this stamp set is it's offered also as a bundle with coordinating punches. So you'll see this larger punch here that we're going to use on our card today, and there's also a smaller ornament punch as well. When you purchase in a bundle, it'll save you 10% and it'll give you all the products, but of course they are offered separately. You'll find these products in the current holiday catalog, and if you don't already have a demonstrator and you would like to receive complimentary copies of either of these catalogs, head over to lisasstampstudio.com and click on Contact Me. So I've got the words here, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp those near the top. Now that we have our greeting, we're going to take our gift card and slide it right down inside of this pocket. Now let's work on decorating the outside. I've used the 2 1/4 inch circle punch, and I've punched a piece of pretty peacock cardstock. This coordinates with the designer series paper as well, and you're going to notice I use the exact same tufted 3D embossing folder on this just to create a little bit more texture. I want to create a layer for that. So I decided to use a piece of copper foil. Isn't this beautiful? Again, this coordinates beautifully with the designer series paper. I'm using one of my circle dies, and this is from one of my most favorite die sets here in the studio. This is called the Layering Circles dies. You're going to notice that there's graduated sizes. In addition to that, it comes with scallop circles and graduated sizes as well. I want to give you a tip about die cutting on foil. I've got my die cutting machine here. I'm going to place my foil on top and then my die. Oftentimes our plates look a lot like this, which means they are etched, and sometimes you can actually feel the impressions. Oftentimes, because of the compressions in your die cutting machine's rollers, those will actually transfer to the foil. So before you put the clear mat over the top, take a piece of white computer paper and cover that foil to protect it. Then place your cutting mat over the top and crank it through. That's going to ensure that none of those etch marks move into the foil. The result is a perfectly die-cut circle with absolutely no transfer marks. I'm going to adhere these 2 circles together, so I'm going to flip this pretty peacock piece over, and then I'll leave a small margin of that copper showing all the way around. I'm going to flip this over, and this time I'm going to use full-size dimensionals, and I'm going to adhere this to the card base. Now let me give you a couple tips about removing these paper backings. That same paper piercing tool attachment that we use to remove that paper backing from that tear and tape also removes these paper backings from the dimensionals. Absolutely love that. Here is that card base. I am making sure that the pattern on my embossing folder is going the same direction as it is here on my card base, and I'm going to adhere that near the lower 2/3 of my card. Now let's do some heat embossing for the ornament image. I have a piece of thick, very vanilla cardstock here, and I'm going to prep the surface for embossing. This is the embossing buddy. There's an anti-static powder inside that will actually tell the embossing powder not to stick where there isn't ink. I'll be using my Versamark ink pad for this, and I've pulled out one of the beautiful ornament images from that stamp set I just shared with you. I want to make sure that my embossing powder is nearby. I'll go ahead and now ink that image up, and I'm going to stamp that here. I'm immediately going to come in with the embossing powder, and I'm going to sprinkle that very generously to cover it. I'm going to give it a light flick to remove any of the excess. And now what we're going to do is we're going to heat set this. I've got my heat tool here. I'm going to turn that on, and I'm going to work in one small area at a time. Now the best advice I can tell you is to take your time and work closely. I prefer to keep the gun moving. That's not necessarily a rule. That's just a Lisa thing. This is going to allow me to make sure that one area turns from that powdery finish to a beautiful glamour enameled coppered finish. If you skip all around, it's difficult sometimes to see where you've left off, especially on light colored cardstock. The paper itself is going to conduct heat. It's going to help spread the heat process of this image a lot faster as well. The great thing about the heat tool is once it gets warm, the next images are much quicker to heat set. You're going to want to be careful too that you don't overheat set it, otherwise the image will appear scorched. I'm going to give that just a second to cool, and I'm going to get ready to do a little bit of watercoloring in this area. I'm going to be using my Pretty Peacock ink pad for this, and I want to add just a little bit of color here to my ornament. Now typically watercolor paper is the paper that you're going to want to use, or shimmery white cardstock, but because my designer paper has a vanilla base, I'm going to be using the thick vanilla paper, and I find that it's fairly absorbent to the ink and the water. As long as you don't oversaturate it, the paper will not pill. I'm taking a clear stamping block and I'm going to tap that inside the Pretty Peacock ink. That's going to act as my palette. I've got my aqua painter here. You just unscrew it and fill it with tap water. This completely eliminates your need for a small cup and water. I've removed the cap and I've made sure that the bristles come to a nice point so that I can control the coverage. I'm going to take a little bit of that color here and I'm going to lay it right over my image. Now I know it's the darkest when I first lay it down, and then what I'm going to do is spread it towards the center where it's going to get lighter. The color is actually going to repel the areas where there is embossing. You'll need to let that sit and dry for just a few seconds, and because it's going to repel the embossed areas, I like to take my rag and I'm very carefully going to blot this so that I can pick up any of that excess water. If you make sure that your brush is not oversaturated, you won't have that problem with so much of the water pilling up to the top. Once the paper is relatively dry, I'm able to come back in and give it a little bit more highlights by adding darker shades to the outside areas. I'm going to squeeze water through the bristles that will rinse it out. Now I'm going to fill in the top of that ornament. And for this, I'm going to use the Night of Navy ink pad. To be sure that I don't transfer any of that color to my other pad, I'm going to take my rag and just wipe that off. And I'm going to use the other corner now and I'll tap that. Just like before, you want to make sure that your brush isn't too wet. But then I'm going to add a little color here at the top of my ornament. Once you've rinsed out your brush again, go ahead and pinch it so that the bristles come to a point, and then you can go ahead and cap it. That's going to ensure that you don't have any stray hairs around the bottom. Once the cardstock is dry, I can come in now with the coordinating punch, and I can punch that image right out. On that same piece of paper, we're going to stamp the greeting. And I'm going to be using the Night of Navy ink pad once again, and I've pulled out the words from that same stamp set, that same Merry Christmas. You're going to notice that these words are in a solid block. The letters themselves will actually create a resist showing the color of the cardstock right through. I'm going to take my paper snip scissors and I'm simply going to cut out this greeting, cutting right along that stamped line. We're back here to the card base, and I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to use my dimensionals on the back side. So I'm going to place one here and one here. Whenever you do a little bit of heat embossing, it is not uncommon for the paper to bow slightly. That's normal. I'm also going to take one of the mini dimensionals here, and I'm going to place that here near the top of the ornament. That sure fits nicely. And then we're going to remove those paper backings. That's going to get mounted here in the center of our circle. And then let's talk about the greeting. Remember, there's dimensionals on this layer and this layer. So we're going to have some elevation difference here, and we're going to compensate for that. On this side, where it's going to be the flattest, I am going to add a glue dot. Under the letter M, I'm going to attach one of the glue dots. Now I'm going to flip this over, and in the center, I'm going to add one mini dimensional. And on the other end, I'm actually going to stack two dimensionals. So I'm going to take off the paper backing to those, and I'm going to take one more, and I'm going to make this side a little bit higher, and that's going to compensate for that difference between these elevations. And then I'll take my words and I'll tack them down here. Here's the card we created together today, and the card I created before you joined me. If you have enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up here on YouTube, which is a like. I'd love for you to subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.